Hello, it's Conor from Force Intelligence again, and today's going to be the second topic of the two-part series of exercise selection. So in part one, we sort of discussed all the things that you want to do to make sure your exercise selection isn't bad, just to make sure it ticks good boxes. Today's going to be more like basically on the advanced side of the spectrum. We're going to look at ways to make exercises really good. So there's a few different perspectives we can take here. Again, as I say with most things, most of what I talk about applies to, your performance side of things in terms of weights. So, your bodybuilding, your powerlifting, your strength sports, etc. These principles I talk about pretty much relate to them. Some more than others, which we'll get to in a second. Right, so we sort of ticked off a lot of the key boxes in the last video. If you haven't watched that, go back and watch it. So with the second one, well, for powerlifters, the law of specificity in terms of range of motion really does matter. Now, one thing that's been shown in research, mainly through isometric research, is if you want to get stronger at a certain part of the range of motion, yes, the technique comes into play, yes, positioning, all these different things, but spending more time in the position you're weak at does seem to correlate with better strength in that area. Mind you, let's say you're really weak at deadlift just below the knees. It doesn't transfer that well to even 3 or 4 inches below or 3 or 4 inches higher. But there is good research to show that it can actually strengthen that exact area. So that might be something you consider in your off-season programming for powerlifters. For bodybuilders, let's talk about muscle architecture. So I should have done a video on strength curves by now and all the different facets to it, but one of it was your muscle's force production curve, as well as how it sort of lies. So a muscle usually has multiple actions that sort of result taking it from an origin to insertion. So thus has multiple functions, especially if you're all muscles across multiple joints. So I'll go through all the examples today, but use an example of the biceps, for example. We'll ignore how different has different functions, but for easy's sake, the main functions are shoulder flexion, so lifting it up as probably a third function. Second, or maybe first, is the elbow flexion component, and the last part's the supination component. Now, different exercises in the gym are going to overload different parts in range. For example, a seated dumbbell curl or barbell curl, all these things are going to mainly overload the mid-range of the movement. So you say overload in terms of bloody physics and all that stuff, but where you get the muscle. So you're going to get it there. So you're going to shorten at the elbow joint. You're pretty shorten at the supinated function. But you're not really doing much to shorten there. Now, what you could do, and a way to make your exercise selection more efficient, instead of doing hammer curl here, barbell curl here, and dumbbell curl here, what you can look to do is okay, I'm going to play around with that shoulder flexion moment arm. I'm going to play around with the position over here. You can now do something that's going to strengthen back here, the start of the curl, the lengthened part of all those functions, such as a inclined dumbbell curl to a degree, a cable curl standing forward, and for the shortened position you can do something like a spider curl or a Scott curl. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, it could be Scott curl, regular barbell curl for mid-range, and that sort of lengthened forward stance cable curl. So now you're sort of hitting it in different ways. You can get different high threshold motor units. You can actually achieve better structural balance. I'll really quickly run through a bunch of key muscles and what they can look like. So if you're looking for maybe short position of the lats, I think I've got a video on the physique program row. Lengthen will be something more out here, a smidge more pull downy in nature with a few other functions. Pecs, so instead of doing just bench, dumbbell press, blah blah, or dumbbell fly, to actually get it short, you need have maybe cables or a pec deck, and then you can sort of tick off length and range with just a bench press or just a deep dumbbell press, for example. Quads, because of the function, let's say we include the break fem in this one. A sissy squat or the rear leg in the Bulgarian split squat will really get lengthened. The rest of the muscles, deep squat, deep hack squat, get shortened, you need that leg extension. So avoid sort of doubling up on the areas that sort of tackle the range of motion over and over. Yet it's probably a better idea to explore the different end ranges. I do find that has better results, again, through all the reasons I've done in other videos, so try and tick off those boxes. If you're trying to figure out how to do this stuff, the best thing you can do is look into an anatomy book. I might do a video on this in the future. of, okay, what are the functions, and okay, where is it loaded, and then you can sort of understand, okay, that sort of exercise, because of like how you're positioned, would overload the shortened or lengthened or mid-range. So sort of tick off all those boxes for hypertrophy, probably for strength, even for off-season. Another thing is the actual strength curve of the exercise. Make sure it isn't too extreme. For example, don't go chucking bands on like your rowing variations. Just try and essentially don't make exercises or choose exercises that are really, really hard in one area and get exponentially easy throughout the rest. Try and have something that's going to be somewhat hard throughout the range of motion. Yes, there will always be different emphasis. Yes, there will be different parts we emphasize in each rep. That's just the art of like sort of levers and biomechanics. But make sure it's not too extreme and you're not sort of tackling too much of the jump volume area. Another thing that's really important is you've got to make sure your exercises are progressible in nature. So you can come back in the gym. There's a way of like getting progress in terms of what I'm going to refer to now is like weight in the bar in time. You can add reps. There's sort of like some standardized variables that you can improve. You're not sort of like, okay, you do the exercise, you start to get better at it, which is technically overload, but you've got like sort of ways that you can go up in weight and stuff like that. Right, another is, okay, it's a little more powerlifting side again. Is the assistant exercise transferable towards your end goal? Let's say you want to peak to a really good bench press, peak to a really good row, squat, deadlift, whatever. Powerlift is not. The closer you get to competition, the more important movements sort of mirror those that sort of aren't too far away. Okay, in a weird way, yes, a leg extension ages away can help your squats, like if it's many, many months away from powerlifting meet, for example. But the closer you get, how actually transferable it is like, other than ticking off the hypertrophy sort of box, the movement skill aspect is like pretty far off. And you move from the spectrum of maybe like front squat, high bar squat, paused, high bar squat with actual like same shoes you use in competition, low bar squats, and then you change your reps and get closer again. So make sure all these things are transferable. And if you've got an end goal in mind with a particular lift, you're not looking at too extreme range of motion for the particular lift you're trying to train. Last thing I'd say is, again, this is sort of phase potentiation principle, is ideally try and choose movements that are going to make other movements in the future feel easier. So what's a random example I did? Okay, I had a phase just like 2 phases ago, before I was going to do behind the neck presses now in last phase, where I emphasized a lot of things that was going to make the behind the neck easier for me, that weren't going to lead to injuries. Things such as strengthening up like my trap threes or just like retractors in general, making sure my rotator cuff is strong so I can sort of access mobility. All these different things that now when I actually come to this phase, I'm not actually focusing on, is it niggly? Trying to work around injuries. No, I can just make sure my sets, reps, weight is in a place where I can use progression. I can focus on the variables that matter, not have to focus on what's holding me back. So again, sort of the art of what makes things good, not focusing on what makes things bad. So if you come along and you're sort of ticking off these boxes, you've gone to the next stage in sort of exercise selection. So make sure it's transferable, make sure it sort of lines up with your weaknesses, make sure different exercises have a different benefits in terms of like muscle architecture, make sure the strength curves aren't too bad, and make sure they can actually help you in the future so they can potentiate exercises feeling good in future phases, or even make other lifts feel easier. For example, you do snatch grip deadlifts, you come to the next phase of regular deadlifts, it feels somewhat easy due to like less range of motion, more stable shoulder joint, etc. So these are the things you should all consider, but only consider these if you've already ticked off the last video. Again, you tick off the things from the last video, you're already in a good spot. But if you go here, you're making it progressible, you're just taking your exercise selection to the next level. So think about these things, think about how you can apply it, think about what it can look like, and see how you go, and actually report back to me. I'd love to start to see, okay, what sort of crowds we can bring in terms of how are people thinking, how can they apply these things. Again, we're trying to move things forward in this page we're doing here. Okay, thank you, bye, let me know.